This is the lesson we're going to look at today. If you've got the book there, whether in PDF or normal format, is lesson 22, page 28. This is all about the ingredients of pitch. So when we think about pitch, we've got the highness and lowness of that pitch. But what we do is we designate these alphabet letters. Those that become the labels that we have for the notes. And the notes are the ingredients that make up the three elements of pitch that we have. We have chords, we have scales, and we have arpeggios. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a really good idea of how you can name chords. Back in the day, I used to work at a heavy metal rock club. I was a barman, and I used to spend a lot of time not working, finding excuses to go and drink beer and go and fraternize with all the other metalheads. And we'd have these conversations. They would draw lines on a wall and then put random dots on and say, right, Ricky, what's that chord? And I'd just look at it and I'd work it all out. And the reason I could work it all out was because I knew this. Octaves, and the thing with the compound octave, being able to name chords, being your own chord dictionary. If you could have that in your head, that would be even better. If we know this business here, then what we can do is we can apply this knowledge to chords. It depends how far we get on today. I may delve into the circle of thirds. Now, some people go, circle of thirds, what's that about, Ricky? And I just say it's a great way for understanding a lot of stuff. So, like I say, we have chords, scales, and arpeggios. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just plot out the C major scale. And I'm going to show you how messy it can get when you want to look at all the extensions that you can have on chords. Let's look at the C major scale. Now, the C major scale is just the natural notes. It goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then what happens is we get to C. And that is the C major scale in its entirety. So we've got the root note here. The root gives the scale or the chord or the arpeggio its name. So we've got root. Second is the second note, third note, fourth note, fifth note, sixth note, seventh note. And then what happens is we get to the eighth note, which is the octave. We can also, because that's a C and that's a C, we just think of it as being a root again. This octave here, this is called the simple octave because that's where your simple chords live. And when I mean chords, I mean triads. If we want to make a triad, what we do is we have the root, we have the third and the fifth, because each of these notes has a specific quality that it lends to the chord or the triad and gives that a personality. The root note, that is the naming note. That's the resolution note. You need to understand the personality that each of these notes add. So the root note, the root is home. So that's where it sounds finished. That's where it sounds really resolved. And this is the function of the root. There's where we are resolved, tension and release. The third is emotion. That's an emotion note. Whether that's a major third or a minor third, that's the kind of emotion we are going to get. The fifth is transparent. It doesn't have any emotion. So it's not an emotional note. If you have a root and a fifth in a power chord, power chords are awesome. It's a blank canvas. You can put minor sounds on top of it. You can put major sounds on top of it. And it always sounds great. That's the triad structure inside the simple octave. As you can see, what happens is we've got this thing called tertian movement. We jump over. So we're jumping over from the C to the E there. It's like leapfrog. We're jumping over the D to get to that E there. We're jumping over in threes. That's what tertian means. So we put that there. And you can see that by tertian movement, that's how we gather these intervals here. We've got the root, third, fifth. Now, what happens if we jump over again? The next note that we jump onto here becomes the seventh. So we get the seventh. And what does the seventh do, Ricky? The seventh is another emotion note, which is why seventh chords are awesome. Once you've learnt your simple majors and minors, then what you should be looking at is learning seventh chords, because seventh chords are the bomb. They are beautiful chords because they have more than one emotion going on there. There are mixed emotions. So if you get a major third with a minor seven, you get a major third with a major 7. There's different permutations that give you different effects, and those are stabilized by the root and the fifth. Because they've got no emotion, then that's their role. That's what they do. While I'm here in the simple octave, let me just talk about something. I had a student once talk to me about sus chords, and he called them sustained chords. It's actually from this suspended. I want to give you this information that suspended applies to the third. We all knew when you were at school there was that kid who got suspended. They got suspended, but because they're suspended, they are coming back. They're not expelled. Expelled is a different thing. Suspended means it's a temporary thing, because if you suspend the third to resolve the sound, you're going to come back to it. So the third has a sense of resolve to it as well. The most common way to do this is you take the third, and instead of playing the third, in this instance, we wouldn't play an E, we play an F instead. And that would mean we get a sus. But we know that if we play a sus4, to make the chord sound resolved, we have to put that third back in there. We have to reinstate it. That would give you a different formula. Just to flesh that out, just show you here, root, third, and fifth. If I do that there, root, third, and fifth, that's just going to be a major triad. Let me just put the notes for that underneath it. So that would be a C, an E, and a G. Can you see how that works? You can put it in a little graph like this if you want. I find that's more useful than trying to write it out in standard notation for non-music readers. So what we do is we take that C, E, G there, and that gives us our C major chord. That would be our C major triad. Now, what we can do is we can swap that out. If we go root 4, 5, then that's going to give us C, F, and G. So you see there, C, F, and G. And because we've swapped out that E for that F, we're going to get a C sus4. You see that this is what's going on with this. It's removed the third. The third is removed, and that's really important when it comes to looking at add 11 chords. What we can do is we can take this back here as well. Not only can we go up a scale degree, we can go back a scale degree here, and we can get the sus2. If we wanted to write that out, a root, a second, and a fifth, we would have a C, we'd have a D, and we would have a G there. And this would give us a C sus2. This just shows you the power of just understanding this in the simple octave here, guys. We haven't really delved into this seventh yet, but as you can see, that's a triad. And then when we extend that with tertiary movement, we get into that seventh. Hopefully that makes sense with this sus here. But I'm going to come back to this suspended information in a minute. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this simple octave again. This is my root note. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move it up again. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. What this does is this gives us another octave. And because we've got more than one octave, we're going to call it the compound octave. So this is the compound octave. Learn this, guys, and you're just going to be able to name chords on the fly. You're going to understand where these ninths, where these 11ths, and where these 13ths all come from. Okay, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Root, you can think of that as being the first note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, what number is this going to be? This is going to be 9. This is going to be 10, this is going to be 11, this is going to be 12, this is going to be 13, 14. And because this is back at C, do you know what? We're just going to call it root. You could call it 15, but that is just over egging the pudding. We don't need to do that. We just think of that as being the root note again there. Hang on, Ricky. You've said the D here is the second, but here you're saying that it's also a ninth. You know how sometimes you get a note like an F sharp and you can call it a G flat as well? You get similar things that happen with scale degrees and intervals. What we're looking at here is the thing that you need to memorize, and this is critical, guys, is that the second is also the same as a ninth. They're interchangeable, and it's always depending on whether there is a third present or whether there is a seventh present. I'm going to come back to this seventh in a minute. The D here is a second, and it's also a ninth. The way that I see the notes in the simple octave, I see them as being sacred. These ones here, we want to keep these separate from any of the other notes. What I'm going to do is if I take this tertiary movement over, going from the seventh, you can see what happens is, boom, I land there on that ninth. So you can see that the next step, moving from the simple octave into the compound octave, is to jump from a seventh up to a ninth. Now we're in the compound octave. Let's carry that business on. Let's go over, jumping over in threes again. So we go from this D to the F there, and that gets us onto the 11th. Let's do it again. Jump over. Let's get over onto the A there. That gets us the 13th. Let's jump over again. That gets us back to our root note. Funnily enough, you should notice, let's just have a little count up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. That's just a repeat of the first note. 7 notes. How many notes do you have in the scale itself when you started out in your major scale? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. Remember, the C is a repeat. I've got to clear some stuff up, some housekeeping, if you will. I said that the D was a second and it was also a ninth. That's interchangeable. Let's look at the next note. This is a third. Now, in old money, you can call this a tenth, and it does get called a tenth, but I think it's a little bit more classical orientated, maybe a little bit more piano orientated. I did do a lesson on my YouTube channel about playing 2-note chords that use the root and the compound third, and I call them compound thirds. You might think to yourself, why don't you call them 10th chords? Because I think of the simple octave as being sacred. Because I don't want to call it a 10th. Technically, you can call it a 10th, but do I want to call it a 10th? No, I don't think I want to call it a 10th. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of that for now, for simplicity. It's a thing, it does exist, but I'm going to get rid of it for simplicity. Let's keep a third sacred. This is what I mean about the root is the root, the third is the third, the fifth is the fifth. Hang on, let's get rid of this G here, because the G here is a fifth. We're not going to call it a 12th. We're just going to get rid of that there, and then we don't need to think about it anymore. The sixth, we can see that is the equivalent of a 13. The B here, that's the seventh. The seventh is sacred, so let's get rid of that 14 there as well. As you've seen there, like I did with that D, that can be a second and it can be a ninth, the F can be a fourth and it can also be an 11th. A fourth and 11th are synonymous. They are synonyms. It happens a lot in music. Let's look at this. A, the sixth. Hang on, it's a 13th as well. So 6 is swappable with that 13 there. Second can be thought of as a ninth. The fourth can be interchangeable with an 11th. The sixth can be interchangeable with a 13th. This is where you might wonder where these note values come from. If you see something like a sharp 4, think of that as being a sharp 11 as well. Let's flip it the other way around. A flat 13, we can think of that as being a minor 6 or a flat 6. They're interchangeable. So hopefully you're starting to get an idea of this landscape of where these notes come from. Now, the critical thing happens on this seventh. This seventh has a function. When we switch from the simple octave into the compound octave, this is like a gatekeeper for different formulas. So when it comes to writing down a chord, if we want to extend into a seventh, we get the root, we get the third, we get the fifth. So we get the triad there. So we want to think about that structure there. We get the triad in that section there. Then we get the seventh. And what that does is that bridges. That's a bridge. And when we do that bridge, then we move up into the compound octave, and then that gives us the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th. These guys are called extensions. So if anybody says, oh yeah, extending chords, then what happens is we get these extensions. And we can see that those extensions are essentially the 2nd, the 4th, and the 6th from the simple octave, but played an octave higher. Hopefully you can see where all these complicated sounding chord names come from. The upper extensions. So those are the extensions to the chord. What we need to be able to do is then use this bridging function. A good way to demonstrate how this works is with 7th and 9th chords. Say we looked at this and we had this chord formula. Root, a third, a fifth. We've got this triad, we've got a 7th, and we've got a 9th. Then what is that going to equal? What would we say that chord is? We know we've got the full triad in there. We've got the root, the third, the fifth, and the 7th is doing its bridging function, and that's a major 7th. And then what happens is we get this 9th as well. So this becomes a major 9 chord. Let me just do some diagrams. We'll start with the root, the third, and the fifth, and we've got the root, and we've got the third. This is one of the problems with the C shape because it has 2/3. So we have to be mindful of that when it comes to doing anything that involves seconds and fourths Let's look at the structure of something like a C sus2. What we can see here is the formula for this is root third fifth. The formula for this is root second and fifth. We've got the root here. We've got a choice as well. We can take these notes. We don't just have to lower them. We can raise them up as well. So instead of playing the root here and dropping down to find a second that I can't get to because you can't go anywhere past the head note, what I could do is I can raise this to find the second because that's the root. The second would be here. So I could put a second there. I'm going to have my fifth here. If I include the third here, then something happens. The chord isn't suspended because the third is present. Remember what I said? When it comes to a suspension, the third is gone. It's temporarily removed from the situation. So we don't play the third there. No third involved. We can also think to ourselves, we can have more than one of that there. If the third was here, if we go back, the second would be the open D string. So we're going to have another second. So we're going to have 2 seconds in that sus chord. We don't want that E string there. So this would give us a sus2 chord. If we take the C chord again, but what we want to do is we want to have a C add 9 chord. The thing is, we know that 2 and 9 are synonymous. What happens is if we have the root and we keep that third there, we've got a root, we've got a third, we've got a fifth, and then what we're doing is we're adding the 9, which is why it's in brackets there, because there's no seventh. There's no seventh in that configuration there, guys. But because we've taken that root and we moved it up here, it's not a second anymore because the third is present, so it becomes a 9th. So whether it's a sus2 or an add 9 is dependent on whether the third is present. The third's present, it's an add 9. If the third isn't present, then you've suspended it. You could, realistically, you could include that third back there again if you wanted to. Who plays this chord? Who plays this shape all the time? You might even play it with the fifth here. I want you to have a listen to it. Music in equals music out. If we take this root, third, fifth, we've got the root. You can even have that fifth there. Most people don't really play the C like that, but if you listen to that there, it's just a C. All we've got is a root, third, and a fifth. We can double up on values, and because this fifth is transparent, it doesn't really make any difference, does it? I think if you listen to this one and you listen to this one, the difference being putting your pinky on there, you'll find that this one sounds more rounded, more complete. When you listen, you hear the thirds clash with each other within that chord. And by changing that to a transparent fifth, what it does is it irons that sound out. And I really like that idea of being able to manipulate the sound so it's more resolved or more tense. Tension and release. Remember what I was saying there, guys, about tension and release. Just to show you something else. With this, root, third, fifth, and ninth, what would happen if the seventh was in there? We're going to add the root, the third, the fifth, and this time we're going to bridge all the way across because we're including all those notes there. So we need the root, third, fifth, seventh, and ninth. The more notes you add to a chord, the more complicated and more complex it's going to sound because you are adding semitones within that. You are adding clashing sounds. You're adding more complexity. This is the root. We've got the third. We've got the fifth. Now we have to start thinking about where we're going to put this seventh. Now, if you know your caged octaves, this is on the A string. So this would be an A-shaped octave. If I go up 2, over 2, then this here would be the root note again. Would be the same note. That's a C, this is a C. To get the 7, I go back 1 fret. I just go to a major 7 is going to live right here. So that would be where I find my 7th. I've got my root, got my third, and I've got my 7th. Sometimes you don't even need the 5th. We're not going to put the 5th in on this one. Why? Can we afford to lose the 5th? Because it's transparent, we don't even need to put it in. You could put it in if you want to flesh out the colour of the whole of the chord, because the 5th will have an effect on other notes. Remember where the 9th was before. Here's the root, would be here, and then we had the 2nd, but we could also interchange that with being called the 9th. So the 9th is going to live just here. So you can see this is all derived from this same shape. This is all the C shape. Now, this starting not to look like a C shape, it looks more like a kind of a diamond shape in there. And you can see that because it's a C shape, you've got to think about it, caged. You can start to see where the C shape starts encroaching on notes in an A shape. So you're moving up this way, so it's moving up into this here. So it's important to understand where this comes from with the cage system as well. So C major 9. Let's do another one. This is going to be a little bit easier because I'm just going through the simple octave here just to show you. The one that we haven't looked at here is a C major 7. We could play just that there, get rid of that 9th. We could have that as root. I could have my major 7 there, but this is the 4th fret. This is the 4th fret on the G string, which is the same note as the open string here, this B string. So we could get a 7 there, or we could get a 7 here. I do it in brackets to show that you can have either or other. There's the 3rd there. We get the root, the 3rd, the 7th there. If you don't want to have a 5th, then you can put it there. If you want to have that 5th, what happens is you play that there. You could have that 3rd in there again. And you could think about it. If I get rid of that there, play a C chord like this and take your index finger off. And that gives you a lovely C major 7. We can see that the full spelling for any chord that we can get would be root 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th. So we can see the notes that we would get for this would be C, E, G, B, D, F, A. The way we think in music can be linear or it can be circular. We get a lot of circular stuff going on in music. Circle of fourths, circle of fifths, and circle of thirds. So circle of thirds, cycle of thirds, sequence of thirds, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. It's just a label for the thing. And what we can do is we can turn this here. We go C, E, G, B, D, F, A. If you've seen my video on the cycle of thirds, you know that I go, every good band deserves fans and cash. The mnemonic is not important. I don't care what the mnemonic is. What I care about is it gives you this way of thinking about this cycle of thirds is essentially the same as this. I said earlier on at the beginning that this could get really messy. Yeah, because if I take that compound simple octave and compound octave again, I'll just clean it up because there's a lot on here. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. What I've done there is I've gone up the 2 octaves. I've gone C to C to get the simple octaves and then C to get the compound octave again. If I want to know my C chord and the extensions that I can have, then I can go C, E, G. Wonderful. There's the triad. Up to get the 7th, up to get the 9th, up to get the 11th, up again to get the 13th, and then I round it off by getting back to the root again. But that only takes care of chord 1. I'm in the key of C major, and I know that the chords that I'm going to have for chord 1 is C. What happens when I want to do chord 2, which is D minor? Then what I have to do is I have to jump over here. Hang on, I'm just going to show you how messy it gets. There's my D, go over, grab my F, go over, grab my A, D, F, and A. Okay, go over, grab my C, grab my E, jump over, grab my A. You can already start to see how much of a mess it gets. Chord 3, which is E minor, E. Hang on, I'll go underneath because I've run out of kind of visibility, being able to see how easy it is to work it out here. There's to B, to D, to F, to A. It's getting into a mess. Let's look at this. The root of F is F, jumping over. The 3rd of F is A. The 5th of F is C. The 7th of F is E. The 9th of F is G. It's a mess. And that's what I want you to see, because sometimes you just need to work it out and see how messy it can be. But if we take that now, that same thing, and come back to this cycle of thirds, what you can see that happens is this is that C major scale represented in that cycle of thirds here, guys. And all I need to do now, I can use a pencil. This is the root note for my C major chord. There's the 3rd, there's the 5th, there's the 7th, there's the 9th, there's the 11th, there's the 13th. All I need to do is just go around and I think to myself, C, E, G, B, D, F, A, C. So it's just every good band deserves fans and cash. If I get rid of this one here, so that was C major, just get rid of this. If I want to go to my D minor chord like I had before, I go, this is the root of my D minor chord, that's the 3rd, this is the 5th, this is the 7th that I'm going to get, that's the 9th, that's the 11th, and that's the 13th. So I've just come from the second one there. So this would be chord 1, this would be chord 2, this would be chord 3, this would be chord 4, This would be chord 5. Those of you who know your chords and understand the Roman numerals, then this is going to be a massive help for you to be able to flesh out those chords. This is why I say this is more important than learning the cycle of fifths at first, because this is about the chords and the notes that live inside one key. So if we look at this, we can work out the notes here, and that then applies to how you plot out the notes of your chords, because you go C, E, G, C, E. There are layers. We need to know the letter names, which is why you need to learn the notes on your fretboard, but you also need to know these scale degrees, because the scale degrees become the ingredients for your chords and for your arpeggios. Yeah, does this make sense? Look at this. Look, F. So say we want the F. We want to know what notes are possible in an F. So we go root, third, fifth, seventh, ninth, 11th, and 13th. We go F, A, C, E, G, B, D. And we can figure it out. We can work it all out. So we know where these are. And then because we know what notes we have on the fretboard here, then what we can do is we can marry the letter names with the scale degrees. But this comes from, like I say, understanding the simple octave and the compound octave. What I did here is I used the ninth as an example. Well, say, for instance, I'll tell you what, I'll do a minor chord. Let's do it like this. One of my favourite chords. I love this chord. Love this one. We're going to do a minor 11 chord. So we've got the root, and I'm going to do this as a shell chord. And this is why shell chords are awesome as well. Root, we get the flat 7 here, and then we get the flat third here. Because a minor 11 chord has a root, it's got a flat 3, it's got a 5, it's got a flat 7, and it's got an 11. Where do we find that? Yeah, where do we find that one? So the root, the flat 3, the flat 7, we've got those already. We're not playing that string there, because that could be, that is a fourth, which is the same as an 11, but because it is so close to that, it's not going to sound great. We're not going to really pull the character of that note out. But what we can do is we can take the fifth that lives here, all right? Okay, so what's one lower than a fifth? One less than 5 is 4. And remember, 4 and 11 are interchangeable. So what we do is we go back and we would find the 11 there. And that would be a great voicing for a minor 11th chord. And that's a beautiful one. You're not just playing this minor 7. Can you see as well here, guys? Fifth. Where is it? It isn't. There is no fifth. And this shows you that there are certain notes that we can omit from these chords. As the chord structure gets more and more complicated, this is a critical point as well, coming back to caged. When you get up to these 13th chords, this contains all of the notes. You have got all the notes in there. Root, third, fifth, seventh, ninth, 11th, and 13th. That's the whole scale in there. You are going to have some clashes. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to get rid of specific notes. And we're going to get rid of notes that don't matter. And the fifth is one that we would definitely want to get rid of. Let's just say we wanted it to be an F major 9, then we can get rid of that fifth, and then we have 4 notes left. We've got 4 notes that we can use there, which is important because the C and the A shapes, those use 5 strings. The G and the E shapes, they use 6 strings, and the D shape uses 4 strings. So in my mind, your minimal viable products that you need to be able to produce any chord, fancy schmancy names, is using a D shape that uses 4 strings, because a D shape uses 4 strings. So there you go. You get rid of the fifth, you've got the root, the third, the seventh, and the ninth, and you've got all the notes that you need. The seventh can perform its function to bridge over to grab that 9. The third is present, so it's not an add. Okay. Now what happens if I go up to the 11th? And I still want to get a D-shaped version, then I have to omit another note. And the other note that I want, it can't be an 11th if there isn't an 11th in it. You only got apple pie if there's apple in it. It's no good if it's rhubarb. So what we need to do is we need to say, what is a note here that isn't a deal breaker? We still need that 7th to bridge. We still need the 3rd to define the tonality to make it into an F major something. So what we can do then is we get rid of the note below it. That means that we still have the root, the 3rd, the 7th, 7th, and the 11th. We've got 4 notes. 4 notes is viable. This is the beauty of the C shape and the A shape and the G shape and the E shape. You've got more possibilities. The D shape is very restrictive. And then, say you wanted some sort of F major 13, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get rid of another note if you want to keep it as a D shape. You get rid of that 11th as well. So you get rid of the 5th, you get rid of the 9th, you get rid of the 11th to maintain and keep that 13th. You can only be a F major 13 if you've got a 13 in it, which is this D here. Get a sheet of paper, draw some random chords out and name them. Nominate one of them as a root, and you can work this stuff out. Now in the book, there is some homework, and this is a video on the YouTube channel. So the thing is, people are leaving their calculations on the comments underneath the video as well. So if you wanted to do that, you can do that.